Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final week of lectures. I am feeling super like I'm missing you all this week. I feel like especially here at the end, I wish that we could have come back together one last time and I could see you and check in with all of you. Alas, that is not the fate of this semester, as you know. And I think my new hope is just that we're able to come back together in the fall, whether you're continuing with me in another class, and I hope some of you will be perhaps taking the second half of the survey, which is one of my favorite classes to teach, or that you'll end up coming to visit me in office hours, saying hello, or taking another class with me in the future, whatever the case may be. My sincere apologies that I wasn't able to or decided against trying to hold synchronous meetings with this particular group. I ended up feeling, as you know from my earlier explanations, that there were too many people who either wouldn't be able to attend those kinds of meetings because of childcare responsibilities or jobs and things like that, or didn't have the kind of internet connection that would really make it feasible for them to do so. So I didn't want anyone to feel excluded, and I chose this format, but now it's, it's hurting at the end in terms of me feeling like I don't know, like I'm talking to myself most of the time without any feedback from you all, though some of you have been emailing me to ask various questions and let me know things. And of course, I've had the Moodle responses every week to get a sense that you're still in it with me, and that's been very helpful. So thank you for taking the time to do that. I'm going to start sharing my screen. I would like to make a couple of introductory announcements before we dive into the usual, the new material proper. But both of these are really important, so I hope you'll take this seriously before, as I said, we cover our last topic today, and into Thursday, we're going to have 2 parts lectures on Gothic art. As you know, the final chapter in your textbook, so you've made it to the end of that if you're hopefully still reading that, and we'll pick up, here if you continue with me in the second half of the survey in the fall. So I wanted to just quickly announce, some of you may have already seen this, that I put the final exam study guide up on Moodle. This is what it looks like. If you scroll all the way down to almost the bottom of our Moodle page now, you'll see this information about the final exam. I'm essentially treating it just like I did exam 2 in terms of this as being an exam that you're going to take on Moodle on your own. You'll have the day of our usual exam, which was scheduled for Friday, May 8th, to take this. So depending on your schedule, depending on what's going on in your life, you just need to find some time to take this on Moodle that day. It will open at 12:01 a.m. and close as usual at 11:59 p.m. on that day. And as soon as you start it, you'll have a whopping 2.5 hours to complete the exam. So I hope this is welcome news. It's going to be, as you'll see in just a moment, the same format. If anything happens, please take note of this little section here that I've added, and certainly this one too, which is just about academic integrity of the kind that I discussed a few lectures ago. If you have any trouble with Moodle on that day, something goes wrong, you're writing in it when your internet glitches out, whatever the case may be, you must email me right away. I'm going to be, excuse me, attached to my email that day, just sitting and watching it constantly to make sure that I can address with individuals who have problems, any problems that arise. I cannot allow anyone to take this exam after this date because of how quickly I have to have final grades turned around. So please take very seriously that you can't email me on May 9th morning and say, oh, sorry, I had some internet problems. It is going to be, unfortunately, something I have to be very strict on. So, if you look at the study guide that I put up, here it is, same format, 2 essays. I kind of hemmed and hawed about changing the format maybe and giving you something different for the final, but in the end I thought, why mess around even more when you've had so much change in your lives, and I've had so much change in terms of this course. Let's just keep it simple in terms of, what I expect from you from this. Either you did really well, most of you did very well on this writing of 2 essays, or you got some notes from me that were, well, I think you need to do this more, or maybe some suggestions. So take those seriously. and write me, again, an essay on a single work of art, which will be sort of auto-fed to you on Moodle. I'll set it to randomize. And then this compare and contrast second essay, with it'll give you 2 works from, here's the list. I tried to get it to 10, and alas, I couldn't get it to 10, but this is less. I believe I gave you 15 for exam 2, so this at least is less than that. And I think this list, if you look at it, will be very clear in terms of which ones are strong contenders for the single work essay, i.e. if I spent an entire video lecture on that work, then chances are high that that one could be the one that you get asked about, or the one that you're given on Moodle. And same, I think some of these you'll see are very comparable, i.e. if we have a tympanum and a tympanum, then those could be very easy to compare to one another. Same, we'll learn about these today. A jam statue compared to a jam statue. That seems like a good contender. So again, watch the comparisons that I cover in the remaining lectures, and then go back and think about the ones that I did before, and those will likely be the strongest contenders. Please, please email me or jump into my Skype office hours. The last office hours are this week. I never hold office hours the week of exams because the schedule becomes so wonky in terms of me trying to get through grading. So this is your last week to connect with me in that way. And of course, email is always available to you. Okay, the only other announcement that I want to make is I was a bit shocked last week to see this email come in, because there had been a lot of discussion amongst the administration and faculty about, are we even going to have SEIs, student evaluations of instruction this year, given what's happened? Is it fair to us professors to evaluate us? I was always on the side of, yeah, I want to be evaluated. I want your feedback. I need to know. You know, I am only, 4 years into my career here at UL. I'm about 10 years into my career as a professor in terms of teaching courses overall. So I still am in this mode where I really like feedback, want feedback. So please take this seriously, both in the sense that I read my evaluations. I read them very carefully. I sort of steel my nerves every time they come in. They come in usually several months after the semester ended. I have never gotten them, I think, 2 months. 2 months after I submitted final grades was probably the first, the closest. What am I looking for today? The soonest I ever got them. So please don't worry, they're absolutely anonymous. And the thing that I saw that is new, they offered this click here to view a PDF of the questionnaire, and I thought, oh, I've never seen that before. It looks like they have added a section, and this is just a screenshot from it, in which they ask you to evaluate the course after we made the transition that we did, which I'm really glad to see. And again, I think will give me some feedback that will be very helpful, especially if we remain in some sort of semi-distance mode in the fall. I don't have any information on whether that's going to happen or not. I pray that we're back in the classroom together in as normal a way as possible, but I don't know that that will happen. So if you have strong feelings about how I was before this happened and after this happened, this will allow you to separate those thoughts or to give me feedback that is different from one to the other. And as I said, I'll take it very seriously. The only other plea that I'll make, maybe I'll stop the share to make the plea more personal, is to let you know that because I'm what is known as a junior professor, i.e. I don't have the job security of what's known as tenure in academia, which is the rank that just above mine. When you get that, I am fireable at any time. I mean, it's you know, not quite as like tragic as it sounds. But these evaluations that you're going to hopefully fill out are taken very seriously. I am not the only one who looks at them. All of my colleagues in my department, I have to put together a packet in which they get to read my student evaluations every year. My immediate boss, the chair of my department, then my upper level boss, the dean, the provost, even the university president has access to what you write on these, depending on how bad it is. I guess would be the only time that the president would probably look at them. So what I'm saying is take them seriously in terms of what you write on there. Will be important for my career, for my potential promotion. They also follow me my whole career. I have had, when I was asked, when I was trying to get the job here that I'm in now, I was asked to submit my student evaluations from the university that I was at before. So know that these, stay with me a long, long time. And therefore, if you have both something positive and or negative or more in the middle to say, that it will be considered very strongly by both me and those around me who are in charge of evaluating whether or not I get to continue teaching in future years. So that being said, I'll go back to the screen share and just say, or point out again, when they close, you cannot fill them out after May 3rd at the end of that day. So make sure if you are going to take them, and really, I really hope that many of you do. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, but the more feedback that I have, the better. So that being said, let's dive into the material. Where did we leave off? As you know, hopefully you're kind of keeping track of this. We left off with the Romanesque, this approximately century and a half of art making in this particular style that allowed us mostly to assess church building projects, though not so much from an architectural history standpoint, but from the standpoint of sculpture. And then we looked at, again, what I thought was an exciting medium. Part of what I've liked so much about teaching this class compared to really any other class I've ever taught is that it allowed us to look at some very different actual physical substances for art making than we ever had, or I ever really had been able to teach before. So the Bayeux quote unquote tapestry was a great example of this in terms of this work of embroidery likely made by women being an unusual medium compared to the sort of standard painting and sculpture. And then, we got to look at some metalwork and jewelry. We looked at mosaics. I mean, we've really had some fun, I think, in this class. I've had fun, at least I shouldn't speak for anyone else, looking at these other media. As we embark on the period that is the end of the medieval, we are embarking on what's known as the late medieval period today. We are examining what is known as the Gothic, and I'll give you a little bit more of a sense of what the Gothic is comprised of. So I'm looking in the kitchen area because my cat seems to be making an attempt to get on top of the kitchen cabinets. Well, it's never a dull moment, as I always say. Oh, I hope she makes that jump. Okay, all is well. I'm just going to keep an eye over there occasionally. Okay, so what is the Gothic going to look like for us in terms of what kind of stuff do we have ahead this final week? We have, yet again, some sculpture on the outside of a building. So some of this kind of decorative stonework that we were looking at in the Romanesque is going to be a carryover, oh, she made the jump, nice, into this next sector. And then yet again, we're going to continue looking at church ornamentation, I guess we could say. But finally, we're going to look at some stained glass, which is exciting again, because it's this medium that really doesn't get a lot of focus. And even if you take the survey 2 with me in the fall, we're not going to look at any more stained glass. So this will be our main topic on Thursday. We won't quite get to this today, though I do think it's exciting to sort of tantalize you, hopefully, with what's ahead. As usual, and maybe I should point out real quickly before I go to the map, as I usually do, the dates here. The dates, as your textbook says in the very first page, are contentious. Not so much on the initial side. 1140 is generally very firmly agreed on as the beginning date, and we're going to see the first church that is built or rebuilt in the Gothic style. But this, the end date, is contentious. Now, some would say that the Gothic continues, depending on where in Europe we're talking about, well into, get this, the 16th century, into the 1550s. We can still see lingering elements of the Gothic, and even one of the churches we're going to look at today has a spire that's added to it in the 16th century. By and large, I think most art historians, and this is obviously my opinion, so I'm putting it here, I think you could push this as far as 1450. But if we're thinking about the heyday of the Gothic, 1400 is really when it begins to give way to the new style that we call the Renaissance. This is not going to be a style that we focus on in this class. As I said, the Gothic is our endpoint, but we can see the beginning of the Renaissance arise even in the early 1300s. It is the 1400s and really after 1450 that we begin to get some of the major masterworks of the Renaissance, as as many of you know, the early 1500s is the era of Michelangelo, of Raphael, of late Leonardo. So the Gothic sort of hangs on for dear life, but really by 1400/1450, we can see it beginning to get pretty strongly killed off, and most definitely it is killed off in Italy. So this is where the geography is important and does, I think, need to be addressed, in the sense that where we're talking about, when we're talking about the Gothic, which, much like the Romanesque, is something of an international, i.e. All over Western European style. Obviously, that's not what international means today, but this is an old-fashioned way that art history used to refer to the styles like the Romanesque, styles like the Gothic. Now she's jumped down in case you're wanting like updates on where the cat is. Sorry. I'm doing my best. Okay. Hope it at least keeps it lively. What's sort of interesting about the Gothic as a style that really spreads pervasively throughout Europe, similar to the Romanesque, which also has just tentacles that go all the way from England to Spain to Italy, into Eastern Europe, and so on and so forth. The Gothic is going to be a similar story, but the Gothic, we're going to be able to pinpoint more where it began than just about any other movement we've seen so far. So this is the map that your textbook gives you. I, again, am like, ugh, this map is not doing it. Like, I don't know, maybe like maps don't do it for you, but maps do it for me. But this one isn't, yikes, this sounds terrible. But this map is not the map that I would give you if I was trying to convey what I think the textbook is trying to convey, which is the expansiveness of the Gothic, i.e. where did it start and how did it spread? Yikes, now I'm thinking that's like such a double-edged sword in terms of the meaning of that, like where did it start and where did it spread in the world of pandemics. You have to be kind of careful how you're describing this. Okay, I'm gonna hang on for dear life here. Like I said, 2 more lectures today and one on Thursday, and you are home free of me for the summer. Okay, where does it start? What this map in the textbook is trying to convey is that it started in what is known, or was known, and I'm zooming in on this map now, as the Île-de-France, the island of France, which is actually in modern day Paris. Now, the Île-de-France is this red on this map. If I go back, you'll be able to see this again in the sort of original format. This is the heart of what ends up becoming modern day national France. So the Gothic begins in this red area centered on Paris, known as the Île-de-France. You can see this in the map. But look what this, I know, rather fuzzy map over here conveys better, which is the spread, this sort of explosion out. It travels upwards into modern day England. It travels over into the Dutch, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, down into Italy, over into Spain. And this spread is sort of what is fascinating about the Gothic, and I think what makes it slightly different from the Romanesque in terms of the centralized spreading that happens from the origin point in France and out to these other places. Now, as you're looking at this term Gothic, you might be hoping that I will explain it at some point, and here I am to do exactly that for you. The Gothic is, as a term, quite a bit later than the moment in which it actually occurs. So this is something that it begins to get called at the very end of when we can describe the style as still existing, as I said, in the 16th century. This is a term that comes about in that era and ends up getting used retrospectively to describe the style of the buildings, in particular, the architectural phenomena that arise beginning in 1140, as we'll see, that in the 16th century they thought descended from, see, she's having a great time in our lecture today, thought to have descended from what were known as the Goths, which are essentially just those tribes that occupied Northern Europe in earlier moments of the Middle Ages or the medieval era. So what was the Gothic? Beyond this term that we know comes later that essentially has to do with buildings and a certain group of people that may or may not have actually had anything to do with the style. The Gothic is this stuff, some of which we've already covered. So I hope you're scrambling to write this down, and I'm going to be looking at your notes probably later today or tomorrow from the Bayeux Tapestry lecture last week, and I'll be excited to see kind of what notes you're taking in general and how good they are. So the style, as I already said, originated in France. I think it's fascinating as a sort of proto-modernist style in that it was viewed as innovative, as modern, even in its own time. We really haven't seen any other movement that has this particular flavor to it. This is something that's going to increasingly come to characterize art in the eras that we'll cover if you join me for the second half of this class, the Survey 2, where we'll see in the Renaissance, part of what makes it distinctive from sort of most of these Middle Ages kinds of movements in art that we've been looking at is that they too view what they're doing as innovative, as groundbreaking, as cutting edge in their own time. The Gothic, fascinatingly, does differ from the Romanesque in the sense that it's tied very deeply to the growth of urban centers. So we looked at very briefly in one of the lectures last week, the sense that this population growth and the increasing turn through pilgrimage routes to cities was leading to a growth of urban centers. This really picks up steam. Oh, she's got some toys going now, huh? In the Gothic era. And we get the increasing importance of cathedrals and the desire, as we're going to see, is to build them bigger to accommodate, I'll skip down to this sort of bullet point down here, the population growth that's continuing to happen. We know that started in the Romanesque and it's continuing to build up and up and up in this Gothic period. There are also developments, and we'll see this in terms of technology, warfare technology, increasingly sophisticated weaponry, increasingly sophisticated tools for agriculture that are partly allowing this population growth and an uptick in lifespan also to occur, not quite on the level we have today, but to occur in this moment. So people are moving more and more towards cities. They therefore need increasingly big and sort of over-the-top cathedrals to house them. And we're going to see that whereas the Romanesque was largely rural, if you go back to the maps that I showed then, you could see that that was certainly true. The Gothic is increasingly a cosmopolitan phenomenon. It is, i.e., a phenomenon that centers on cities, or early modern cities. So I already pointed out these technological advances, but they are also going to allow for really fascinating new building endeavors in terms of these technological advances are going to, of course, lend themselves to exciting new developments in architecture. So what we're going to see, and I'm gonna give you a bunch of examples in just a moment, are these architectural forms which take on, please write this down, if you don't write anything else down here, a sense of weightlessness. So we're going to see light, weightlessness, a couple of other characteristics be true of churches. So if we go back to the way that Romanesque churches looked, and I'm showing you one of the Spanish examples that I pointed out to you last week, we had this sense, and I pointed this out a lot, of a kind of massive, solid, heavy, earthbound sensibility to Romanesque building projects. And these are certainly big churches. We know that they were needing to accommodate the thousands of pilgrims that were coming to visit them, but they did not build sort of high and light. They built heavy and sort of earthbound and wide in many instances. First and foremost, the easiest thing to see that makes the Gothic fundamentally different from the Romanesque is that now we see the Gothic is focused on building upwards, on building vertical, on moving towards heaven, we might say. There is an increased sort of attention not to building in such a way that there is this stability, this solidity, this heaviness to the forms, but instead wanting to convey through this sort of spiritual weightless principle, the interaction of the heaven and earth principle through the actual architectural forms, which is absolutely fascinating as far as I'm concerned. So I told you before that we could pinpoint when the Gothic begins in a way that is unusual compared to a lot of other movements in this sort of prehistoric and early modern world. The Gothic is generally considered to begin with the church that I'm showing you on the left here, the Abbey Church of Saint Denis, which is in Paris. It's sort of located in not the city proper, but in one of the suburbs of Paris. But it is located again in one of these cosmopolitan centers of this Gothic world. And it was a project in terms of there was a church already there, an abbey already there, but the very famous abbot Suger, who I'm showing you a later print or representation of here on the right hand side, he took it as his sort of pet project is an understatement, to rebuild and to add on and to modify this Abbey church to, as it says here, become one of the greatest churches in the world, to become the actual spiritual center of France, the beating heart of Christianity in this particular nation. So what did he emphasize? A whole bunch of things. So he wants to make this the spiritual center of France, i.e. we have this new tendency not to make these pilgrimage churches, though they certainly still exist, that are in these kinds of rural areas that people have to go out to, but to make churches that are right in the heart of the urban centers that people are already working and living in. We have, again, an architectural form that is meant to be extremely graceful, extremely elegant. You can see from the line work of the stone, the way that this church looks on the inside, that we have the sense of verticality, but also weightlessness, allowing in tons of light. So these very large windows, so different from Romanesque churches in that they allow a huge amount of light to come pouring in. And Suger, in numerous writings, and I like that your textbook chapter this week actually includes a text box that has some of his writing. Maybe I'll point it out to you. It's on page 393. I don't know if you can see this, that we get his, Abbot Suger's, description of the sort of building process of Saint Denis and some of the things that are important to him. So I leave that for you to read and perhaps to point out if you end up having to write an essay on any element of the Church of Saint Denis. Actually, now I'm wondering, did I put Saint Denis on the study guide? Yikes, I don't remember. Should I go back and look? How many minutes am I at? I always run out of time. Is Saint Denis on here? I don't think I did, because I'm gonna focus on other stuff. All right, I leave that for you to figure out. So we're gonna move through this quickly. I've already gotten through most of it, but what is Suger trying to stress with this new church? He's stressing, as you can see here, light luminosity, because he believed that what he called this miraculous light, if it was flooding into the church, that it would almost become or evoke or remind people of the light of the divine, of God itself. That this colored glass, and this is all stained glass work, though this is later, which is why we're not focusing on it in this particular church. This is a church that unfortunately underwent destruction in certain periods, underwent, and I'll say more about this, rebuilding, and is the example of the sort of original Gothic church, but isn't a great example in terms of us looking at some of the individual parts within it and on the outside of it. So he hoped that people inside of this space would, through this luminosity, through this grace, through this weightlessness, through this verticality, through all the things that I'm describing as the core tenets of the Gothic style, that this would remind them in a kind of revelatory way of the Spirit of God being present, being ever present in really important ways. One last thing, and I'll move myself as I see I'm covering up this important bit down here in yellow at the bottom. Suger also stressed what he believed to be harmony that was created through the perfect ratio among parts in terms of the various proportions that characterize this church and are going to come to characterize a lot of other Gothic churches. So the moment that I read this, I of course thought, perfect ratios, proportions, oh my gosh, we've seen this before, right? Oh, we've seen this as far back as the Old Kingdom, when we looked at Egyptian art and discovered this business of the canon, the system that they built for the depiction of figures that allowed so much Egyptian art to be really tightly coherent stylistically for centuries and centuries and centuries, even millennia, which is hard to get our mind around. And I thought they weren't the only ones, right? We saw Polykleitos with his canon here, with his rule or measure system of perfect proportionality for the human body, which was conveyed through the sculpture, including works like this Doryphoros. This is certainly this ideal of beauty brought about through a system of proportionality and through a kind of harmony of forms is not new to the Gothic. We've seen this time and time again. So if you end up having to write any sort of lecture or any sort of essay on the Gothic, whether it's this object or a number of others that I've included on the study guide, I would love to see you make reference to this business of sort of long form principles in our class that have held from Egyptian to Greek and now into the late medieval and Gothic era. So as I said before, what I want to focus on in this lecture, or what's left of it, is the sculpture that is on the outside of these churches. We're going to look at a little bit today and then more of it on Thursday. Alas, Saint Denis was the subject of a great deal of, what do they call it? This is one of those moments where in class you would help me when I can't remember a word. Destruction in the French Revolution. So it was perceived to be, because it was the place that the kings and queens of France were buried, and it continues to be the place where you can go and visit many of the kings and queens in terms of the sculptural crypt that they have there. They perceive this to be a church that should be, vandalism is the word that I'm looking for, vandalized on the outside, as the center of a kind of power that they were resisting in the French Revolution beginning in 1789. So we'll have to transfer over to a church that's only slightly later, which is this Notre Dame that is in Chartres, which is about a day trip outside of Paris, so not all that far. If I went back to the map, you can see, I think I've got it on this map. Yeah, see, Chartres is not far from Paris on this map, so you can see this sort of initial spread to some of these churches that are very close by in this neighboring area within the Ile-de-France. So Chartres is a cathedral that we believe many of the stonemasons and architects who worked on Saint Denis immediately went and began helping to build over here. So there's a lot of stylistic similarity, though there are later additions, as you can see in the slide ID information here. This left-hand spire is significantly later. It was built in the 16th century. And as you can see, this is a church that was worked on for a long time. We're going to see this in many instances, including, if you know about the Cathedral of Notre Dom, this just means Our Lady, that is in Paris. So this isn't the church that unfortunately had some burning happen to it. That's a weird way to put it. Last year, many of you may remember, this one has not had that happen, and we'll be able to look at it more deeply as a result. So similar to what we had in the Church of Saint Denis, again, this beautiful, elegant, graceful strength of verticality, all of this luminous light pouring into the inside of this cathedral, which well, it did the thing again. I'm sorry. All of a sudden it just stopped and then the little wheel was turning. My sincere apologies. I'm going to keep going. I don't like trying to stitch the videos together. It seems to produce files that are so huge that I can't upload them to Moodle. I'm going to risk it. I'm going to be a wild lady today and keep going. My apologies. I will repeat the last little bit of what I was saying as I restart the screen share here and hope this doesn't happen again. I went back to using the regular computer because I like it better. It has a much bigger screen, and supposedly it has more memory than my little laptop, but maybe I need to complete this course by using the laptop. All right, not your problem. So the last thing I was saying was just about this interior being so similar to the principles that we were looking at in Saint Denis: verticality, light, luminosity, weightlessness, grace. All of these principles are here. I thought I would point out that this is another church that has ended up being the site of a lot of pilgrimage routes since it was built and in the centuries since. It does have another one of these. I did it again. All right, I'm gonna stop this and I'm gonna divide this lecture into two parts. My, as usual, sincere apologies that my tech seems to be totally failing me here at the end. So this is the end of part one of what is going to be the Gothic lecture for Tuesday, April 28th. I'll see you in a moment. Sorry, everybody. Hello again, I'm back. Welcome to part two of the the Gothic lecture for Tuesday, April 28th. I am going to try to stitch these two together for what I'll post on YouTube, because YouTube seems to allow me to post way bigger files, but Moodle I am limited, so I'll have to put this up in two parts. Again, my apologies. So let me dive right into it, because I know our time is short and I've lost a lot of time from having to switch over to the laptop. Let's hope the laptop doesn't fail us. Oh yeah, see, this is different. All right, it's a much smaller screen, and I kind of had the PowerPoint made for the other one. That's okay. So I was just pointing out that this Notre Dame in Chartres, which is in France, the sort of next major example of Gothic architecture, you utilize many of the same builders and sculptors from Saint Denis, which you can see was finished just before it. Is another one of these pilgrimage churches. It is the site of a relic, in this case, what is believed to be the piece of the cloth, the tunic worn by the Virgin Mary when Christ was born. I just thought I would point out too, because this is a nice little tidbit, that it is another one of these churches that has one of these labyrinths on the floor that is sort of evocative of the twisting and turning path of life. This is the overall plan or design for it. This, of course, comparable to the last time we saw one of these labyrinths, which was in the Church of San Vitale in Ravenna, when we were looking at early Christian and Byzantine art. Shameless self-promotion, I will just yet again point out to you here at the very end of the semester, and as far as I know, the study abroad program, God willing, will be happening this coming summer. I can only hope that the world will look much more like we're able to travel and do this sort of thing again. As far as I know, I'm still on to teach it. So if you'd like to walk the labyrinth at Chartres with me, from quarantine to actually in the building, maybe put this back on your radar, and know that my hope is still that I'm able to do teach programs like this in the future. Now, finally getting to the meat of it, this is what it's been all about. We have been waiting to see the Tympanum sculpture in order to compare it from this Gothic cathedral back to the Romanesque, where we saw sculpture on tympanums was a major thing. This one at Chartres Cathedral is exciting in the sense that you get not one, not two, but three tympanums all on this west portal, on this side that is the side that represents the Gothic that was built, as you can see, between 1145 and 1150. It again takes us back into this realm of Tympanum sculpture. This is something we saw again in the Romanesque. You know that this is this semicircular area over the entrance of a church, or it can be over the entrance of a number of different things. But this is, oh gosh, sorry, I just didn't make this PowerPoint for this other laptop, so I'm gonna have to start making some adjustments. Or I guess I could just make myself smaller. So as I said, there are three tympanums on the west portal of this church. It is a little bit contentious what the one on the far left side actually represents. It used to be the case, i.e. when I was an undergraduate student, we studied this as representing the ascension of Christ, so Christ going up to heaven after his resurrection. This is now somewhat more contentious and is explored as potentially being Christ before his incarnation as a human, so before he took human form. I leave it to you to perhaps do a little more research to decide where you land on this. In the center is yet again a subject that's familiar to us, the second coming of Christ, this moment at the end of days from the book of Revelation, when Christ comes back according to the system of belief to judge us. And then on the right are some lovely scenes from the life of the Virgin Mary, again in this register mode, which is interesting to think back as we have seen some works based on registers in this class for a long, long time. So we're going to focus today, in the time I have left, Oh, I see I don't have a timer going. Oh my gosh, this Zoom, I don't have the same settings on. Yikes. Okay, looking now, it's okay. I'm gonna try my best not to go on and on. So we're gonna focus on this central tympanum, as I was just pointing out, which shows the second coming of Christ. This, hopefully, you remember, is similar to what we had on the face of the Church of Saint-Pierre and Moissac, when we were looking at Romanesque sort of development of this kind of tympanum sculpture. It is fascinating, I think, to compare these two. I would say this is a strong contender for your second essay on the exam. So I hope this is something that you read about in the textbook, continue to think about, take some good notes on. We could do immediate comparable stuff in terms of, I'm showing you the slide that I had for that lecture before, where we could see that there was an example of hieratic scale. And I would ask you, if we were in class, do we still have hieratic scale shown in the tympanum at Notre Dame at Chartres? Hopefully heads will be shaking. Yes, we definitely have an instance in which Christ is much larger than everybody else. We fascinatingly have some of the same exact iconography in terms of, at Moissac, we had these four beasts representing the four evangelists. We have the same surrounding Christ, though without the two interceding angels. And the textbook tells you we actually have the same 24 elders represented here, though in a sort of grander scheme than they were fitted into these compartments here registered in the tympanum at Moissac. We additionally, the textbook says, have the 12 apostles represented here. So it is a slightly more dense or complicated iconographical schema, but it is something, again, that we can compare in terms of what it actually shows. And I think by honing in here and really looking at the representation of Christ from Moissac now to Chartres will tell us a great deal about what the finer changes are that are just beginning. And I want to point out, this is the beginning of the Gothic. So we're going to see everything I'm pointing out right now deepen and become clearer and even more entrenched when we are looking at further Gothic objects in the lecture on Thursday. So I think what you can see right off the bat, and your textbook points this out, is that to some extent, the sense of really impending doom, the darkness and the pessimism that we see on the tympanum representing this end of days at Moissac, this is a much darker representation of this moment than the rather, again, graceful, beatific, somewhat weightless, somewhat lighter representation of the exact same narrative or subject here in Chartres on the left. I think you can see too, and I kind of looked for various representations, had a difficult time finding really good photographs, though I think these two are very good, of the different representation of Christ here, where I think you can see pretty clearly that this wide-eyed Christ of the Revelations moment in this earlier, darker, more sort of early medieval sensibility about the judgment day has Christ as sort of an all-seeing, all awesome power circumstance kind of being. Christ here, I know he looks sleepy, and I imagine that if we were in class together, people would be raising their hand like, why does Jesus look so tired in the representation on the tympanum of the West Portal at Chartres? I actually think that if we were to see this in person and not be looking at it from head on, you know that this is not the right way to look at this. If we were in front of this in person, as I hope some of us will be in about a year's time in actual Paris and Chartres, again, God willing, we would be looking up at this. We would be looking up at it from significantly below. And I think the eye contact that is likely made is actually the sort of eyes that look sleepy from this angle, I believe looks like he's making sort of peaceful contact with you as you move through the doors. We'll have to test it, those of us who are actually able to get to this church someday in a kind of study format. So this is not the end of the architecture, and I'm sorry I'm going a little bit long today. The sculptural motifs within this architectural monument. We also have depictions, as you can see down here, on what are known as the jambs. Door jambs is probably more familiar term to you that we use in modern parlance, but these jambs and jamb columns come to be increasingly decorated over the course of the Gothic in more and more illustrious and complicated ways, and we're going to see Chartres is certainly is a great example of that. So I want this to be a term that you use, that you have some cogency with. It's certainly an area in terms of decorative motifs that we could compare to, hopefully you remember the old Trumeau, let me move myself up here, that was decorated again in that church at Moissac, where we had the representation of what's believed to be the prophet Jeremiah, really nestled in here, almost so stylized, so abstracted that he became a part of the building itself in a way it's a little bit unsettling. This is the first thing that I want to make sure that you see as a fundamental difference between the jams here that we're seeing the sculptural motifs on at Chartres compared to the sculptural motif on the Trumeau at Moissac. Showing you a different angle to hopefully make it clearer. But I hope that you can see that these sculptural forms, these figures, are actually sort of emerging from the building. They are separate from the columns that they are attached to it in a way that's really different from the way that the abstracted figure of Jeremiah was so utterly a part of the building, to the point that it makes him not really feel or look all that human. This, I think, we could put together with the representation of Christ there in the center of the tympanum to be a sign of, you'll see I have it down here, the increasing sort of nascent return to naturalism that we can see taking place in the Gothic, that is probably one of the most fundamental differences from the Romanesque, other than the architectural phenomena that we were looking at before. So this is different from what your textbook calls the accented or accentuated stylization, which we saw in sculpture from the Romanesque period. This building at Moissac was our kind of contemplative example in this regard. I thought I would point out too, in terms of this naturalization, that we're not completely back in the realm of perhaps what we looked at most strongly in the classical Greek era, in terms of figures looking like real bodies, looking like real people. As you can see here, they're still extremely elongated. They're still raised up in a space that reminds you that they're in this heavenly or spiritual or otherworldly realm that is not the humble, mundane, earthbound world that we humans, represented by this little lady looking at these, are sort of victims of. But nonetheless, despite the kind of differences here, and despite the nascent or just being born nature of the naturalism, and I apologize that this is the highest resolution photo I could find, but of course it's one you have to pay for to have the advertisement stuff removed here. But look at how naturalistic the representation of these faces is already at the very beginning of the Gothic. I think this figure here is probably one of the most astounding examples of this. Even the garb that she's wearing, the little sort of increased pooch of her belly, so to speak, as a sort of quintessential feminine anatomical element is astounding. I mean, I can almost see what this garment that she's made of is made of, this wonderful knot that's tied around the lower part of her waist, and the very beatific look on her face and on all of the these are Old Testament kings and queens and prophets that are represented down here in numerous forms across the jambs on this west portal. One last point I want to make, and that is that the representation of these Old Testament Christian kings and queens is taking us back, actually, again to San Vitale, to the representation of Justinian and Theodora in this religious space. And we should understand Chartres very similar to San Vitale, and as an example of the coming together of politics and religion, the coming together, and we're going to see this strengthens over the years. If you continue in your studies of art history, you'll see that this is a profound phenomenon in the Renaissance and in the Baroque after it. But this idea of the relationship between different kinds of power, religious power and political or governmental power, is yet again here because Chartres is an important building in terms of the justification of the power of French kings from when it was first made and continuing well through the 18th and the 19th century. So that is something that again relates in a deep-seated way from the Byzantine Christian era and now into the late medieval Christian period. We see some of the same values carrying over in a really fascinating way. Last but not not least, I want to give you your little assignment. That is to pretend that you're there, to imaginatively transport yourself to this Cathedral of Notre Dame at Chartres, to pretend you are a medieval pilgrim. I hope this isn't too hokey. Entering through the doors here of the cathedral. Obviously, you're going to have to choose which door you'd like to go through. I'm particularly interested in this one on the left because it's so contentious what exactly it represents in terms of narrative, so I think I would probably go through the far left door. Some of you may choose to go through the center because that's what we've been focusing on, but I hope some of you will actually choose to explore these other doors by looking at some images online, and I put up some suggested resources for you on Moodle that will hopefully help you look at more of these images, dive a little bit more into some of the debates going on. One of them is one of these smart history videos, which I think some of you like. You're welcome to watch it. It's a bit long on this one, so I'm not assigning it per se, but get a sense of what these look like, and then write me essentially a paragraph, 4 to 5 sentences on Moodle, describing what you see as you enter. So describing what's on the tympanum, what's on the lintel, what's on the jambs all around you, as sort of fully as you possibly can, and I'll enjoy reading those, and as usual, at the end of the week. All right, I know that I've gone over time on this one. My apologies for the technical difficulties. I will do my best to get everything uploaded now, and hopefully we will not have these problems because I'm going to just use this laptop, I think, for our last lecture on Thursday. All right, everybody, as always, top priority, take care of yourselves. Do your best to finish out this very difficult semester strong, and I will see you virtually, sort of, again soon. All right, bye.